Warning! This review will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode by now, I advise you do so before watching this video. If you decide against this advice, however, you waive the right to inquire about legal recourse in regards to your hurt feelings, because it's all your fault. Also, if you spoil future episodes in the comment section, a fate worse than death will be coming your way. The map is called Starlight and Sunburst to the Front. And, well, it could be a very, very good watching experience, or like their prior escapade, be infuriatingly bad. The only way to find out which one will win out in the end is to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and see how it turns out. Now, ladies and gentlemen, without any interruptions, internet issues, or depression stopping it from coming this week, welcome to Pones N Stuff. Speaking of Uncommon Bond, it was an unamusing failure, so the prospect of another episode featuring the community's shipping fodder at the centre of a plot made me decidedly anxious. After the last outing left me more aggrieved than you could possibly imagine. This was all thanks to a laborious pace, stagnant tone, random insertion of characters that were really unnecessary in the broader picture, and of course, a premise that didn't have enough room to stand on its own 2 feet and survive adequately. So what this episode needed to do was to learn from their mistakes and iron out those kinks, ram it full of interesting characters and development, and make a story that's actually worth watching. I can say though, with surprise on my face, that this episode managed to do just that and come home swinging. For the most part, that is. Sending Starlight and Sunburst to the place they once called home is already an enticing enough plot device, but highlighting a conflict within it between parents and children seemed a little dull on its own. Thankfully, the parents at the centre of proceedings, Firelight and Stella Flare, who, in my opinion, are very similar in name, which makes me think there's something else going on between them, were the extremes of the kind of doting and stringent caregiver that one could have in reality, which may be somewhat distant to others, but extremely relatable if it hits home for you. And having one of them be stuck in the past and another surging to push forward and have a plan for anything in hand were intricate, but were heightened shockingly by the accompanying social themes of gentrification and preservation, as it became all the more interesting and a fascinating showcase to watch as the societal and personal implications came to a head as parent and child shifted alignment on the spectrum, as the friendship problem red herring was shed and hit on a more personal level for many, echoing the frustrations that they could have with their own parents, and the children the same, offering up a deeper narrative than many would have expected, that broke the rules by distorting storytelling and conflict structure into a Frankenstein's monster of construction that surprisingly worked to its benefit. As a whole, it showed the flaws and strengths of all 4 characters, amplified by some superb voice acting all round that highlighted that neither were as high and mighty as each other, creating depth that ensured the writing of the principal quartet was deathly serious, a tone that never let up while still displaying an air of sympathy and understanding that meant said tone should not have weighed down as much as it did, but it was disappointingly apparent that it ended up being the case, because without many comedic moments to break the tension, albeit some situational comedy which was fleeting and amazing facial expressions which we were in abundance of, the pace suffered, which was dogged down even further by a fluctuating and disjointed 3-act structure that left the ending feeling compressed and the setup of the prior 2 acts feeling as tall as the Empire State Building, and missing out on key continuity points regarding Sunburst's role as Flurry Heart's Crystaller and Magic Tutor forcibly painted Sunburst in a worst possible position than it should have, while also dropping the societal backdrop the episode had carried when the second act ended, thrust the story into an awkward corner, losing its luster abruptly. The thing is though, it can't be denied that there was a lot going on here, but it was not as smooth as it could have been, because seemingly happy with what heavy constructs and strong characters were displayed, finesse was not on the menu to iron out the kinks that they had created in the writing room, leaving this episode decidedly weaker than it appeared casually as a result. When you have both sets of characters switching alignment from good to bad, the traditional storytelling self-fulfilling mantra being thrown up into the air and being told to find its own way, and the goods and bads of multiple themes including growing up, maturing, and letting go of the past, all being lumped together into one dense package, confidence is going to be flying around thinking they've done their job incredibly well. However, lack of oversight has meant that flaws are going to come from it regardless of that. So that therefore means that this episode's decision to go with a bigger is better mentality, despite having indecisiveness over whether to choose a sociological or parental relationship moral, has ensured that the leading light of the writing could not save this episode from gradually crumbling over time, despite how entertaining and thought-provoking it ended up being. Which is quite sad, but when you look at the morals themselves and the surrounding stylistic elements, it's not hard to see why I've come to that conclusion. The episode gave an air of imperiousness, much like Stellar Flare and Firelight did. But just like them, they were confronted with a sensitive underbelly that proved to be its failing grace. Having two morals come through side by side from two different sets of characters and perspectives could have easily backfired, and while I've made claim to the story's bundled approach to handling them, the use of them to buoy up the quartet of main characters and the mise-en-scène of Sire's Hollow in this current guise showed their effectiveness, helping to repair some of the narrative's issues. Now sure, I'd have preferred them to have made their mind up sooner on which one was more important, as it would have benefited the episode as a whole, but it helped the character's progression and growth while teaching an important lesson that parental love, regardless of the guise, wants to achieve the same goal, and that much like their children, they can make similar mistakes and all have to learn and appreciate each other for what they give to each other, even if it seems a burden to either side. It came from both perspectives naturally, resonated with power, and came through with more impact than I anticipated early on. If only for that execution in the story, we'd have been on for a winner, much like Surf and or Turf did earlier on in the season. And with a heavy hand cast around them from all angles, the music and animation did their best to heighten what they could, with the former faring slightly better than the latter, all the while proving as absent as each other in retrospect. The score was bountiful in emotional expressiveness, accenting scenes with sterner or bubbly orchestral tones to fit the fluctuating changes in mood without being overbearing to the dialogue, making its presence known. However, a distinct lack of power and genre variety, the common theme this season, over time meant it felt out of favour, as not enough was pumped in to add liveliness to some more dull aspects of proceedings, such as the pseudo-montage and the reconciling message, revealing scenes to give them a helping hand. It did a good job regardless, but it needed more foresight to understand where it was needed and where it could be easily placed to help. And while visually the new location of Sire's Hollow and its split personality, resulting in some varied and lovely character and building designs, the stupendous facial expressions on show, and the use of a lovely dual split screen effect was nice to look at, thanks to a lack of major set pieces, the failure of which being a pair of face aligning cross dissolves and reusing the same dropping transition effect throughout ensured that it looked as disjointed as the story was in terms of polish. There was a nice amount, but lacking in cleaner aspects to show the labour of its work, which actually quite well sums up this episode nicely when all is said and done. I think it's safe to say that this episode threw my apprehensions that Uncommon Bond created well and truly aside. For the most part, it showcased Starlight and Sunburst in a way that benefits them and gave me a full to bloated story that was captivating enough to where it didn't lead to a lot of frustration and tedium. But it does show me, with that point, that it wasn't quite to the level it desired to be, because much like Firelight and Stellar Flare's aspirations and decisions, they looked great and were done with good reason and intent, but under the critical microscope it had weaknesses and flaws that sent a potential utopian treasure into a damaged state that could still be appreciated, but would need to be re-evaluated and rebuilt to fully reap the benefits of what it sowed. This was an episode that took risks with its narrative and conflict storytelling, showed us a complex and fun yet introspective group of characters, gave us a strong moral duo to dissect, and had music that, while minimal in its usage, did its job. I should be and am applauding it for that. However, amongst the midst of those great things, it juggled two distinctly different thematic morals without much care. It undersold the visuals, continuity, and pace, while giving us a humorless and burdensome tone to work with. This episode is as fractured as it is wonderful. It's thoroughly enjoyable, but comes home looking worse for wear after I was finished with it. Maybe that was the point though, to show that not all is perfect, or as resolute as it may seem, which would make sense given what the characters held so close to their chest throughout the runtime, but it doesn't stray away from the most important factor of all, that no matter how good an episode looks casually, through the critical observation, it'll always hold more weight in comparison and show the episode's real colours that are not visible when pure emotion is caught in the web. Thankfully, there's enough good things here to where it's still a strong episode, but if more attention had been paid to it, we'd be looking at one of the best this show has done, and probably one of the best that this season has given thus far. And to know that it didn't means that while I am happy with what it's given to me, I'm left mulling over what might have been thanks to some persistent mitigating factors that really should have been buffed out before it was put to air. Overall, the parent map scores a total of 16 out of 25, which is a B-. In closing, it may seem that I've been extremely negative about this episode that should be viewed in high regard due to the rating it's gotten and generally because people are receiving it well. Well, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, I've been quite harsh on this, I think, within good reason, because there were so many amateur, menial, and ridiculous pointless mistakes that lost it points that it should have been given. I don't normally come out of an episode that's ranked a B-, feeling aggrieved and frustrated, but this is what happens sometimes. Because this episode set itself up on a pedestal that I know it should have reached without even trying. But it made its life pretty damn difficult for itself. All because it didn't have the oversight to see those problems. And the fact is, it was enjoyable, it was entertaining, it was fun, and I can't shy myself away from that, but post-analysis, I know this episode should have gotten a 20 out of 25, a 19, something that high. But instead I get an episode here that was good, but it could have been great. There is a difference there, and lost points on the story, on the writing, on the animation, the music, and the message. All of them could have added something to it to have given it some extra buffering. But it wasn't given. And I then have to look at it and go, it was good, but you could have been a million times more than what you gave to me. That being said, I should look at it and say, you know what, it was fun, it was nice, and I can at least be happy that I was entertained pretty much throughout by it. So yeah, this conflicted idea that I have about it is going to remain for some time, especially when I come to my end of season roundup. I'm not entirely sure whether this viewpoint will remain. It depends entirely whether the episodes in between and towards that can all make amends. So with that in mind, I'm hoping the next episode this show reviews will be up to similar quality, albeit slightly better. Maybe I'm making my expectations too high. But then again, considering what I've reviewed on this show this year and the quality they've thrown out, maybe it's warranted and justified. I've been Freddie Thomas, you've been people watching, this has been another episode of Pones N Stuff for the CC Network, and I will see you all next time.